On March 11th, Commander of U.S. Central Command Admiral Brad Cooper confirmed to the media that the U.S. is using artificial intelligence to directly support combat operations over Iran. Now, the Admiral made it clear that human beings always make the final decision as to whether or not to engage a target, but he also explained that American troops are using a variety, as he put it, of AI tools to help, quote, sift through vast amounts of data in seconds so our leaders can cut through the noise and make smarter decisions faster than the enemy can react. And while he didn't specifically name the AI tools that are being employed in this fight, it's all but certain that chief among them is the Maven Smart System, an artificial intelligence-supported command and control capability that soaks up data from sensors all over the battlefield and beyond, fusing it all into a single God's eye view and then making executing strikes against targets as simple as a few clicks of a mouse. Now, Maven can not only nominate up to 1,000 targets for strikes per hour, it can help the user to determine the right weapon to use, the right aircraft to carry it, the right airbase to launch from, and much, much more. Taking a process that used to take hundreds of people hours or even days to complete and wrapping it all up in a matter of minutes instead. But that's not the only way Maven is changing how wars are fought. And while smart targeting capabilities aren't enough alone to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the experience American forces are gaining with Maven and similar tools in this fight is sure to pay dividends for a long time to come. Now, I know that's no real solace at the gas pumps, and maturing an AI system that does seem strikingly similar to the ones science fiction has long warned us about might not ring as a very good thing to a lot of us either. But there is no denying that AI will have an immense impact on how wars are fought in the years to come. And with that in mind, having the most robust, mature, and trustworthy artificial intelligence capabilities could be a real silver lining. You know, if you squint at it just right. So let's talk about the admittedly scary capabilities of the Maven Smart System, because it's already deployed across all American combatant commands and is already in use on the battlefields of the Middle East. I'm Alex Hollings, and welcome to Firepower. Ground News helps you stay on top of what's going on in the world while also helping you see right through common forms of media bias and the rampant sensationalism you can find everywhere these days. Ground News pulls this off by compiling stories from outlets all over the world and then sticking them all into one easy-to-read feed, making it easier than ever to not just stay on top of the news trends, but also to see the differences in how stories are presented and how they're covered by different outlets. You can even choose specific topics that you want to stay on top of, like the military, Ukraine, fighter aircraft, or AI. Like this one about the Pentagon saying the US military expended some $5.6 billion worth of munitions in just the first 48 hours of fighting against Iran. Ground News has already gathered coverage of this story from 24 different news outlets, including at least 4 left-leaning and 7 right-leaning ones. And here on the right-hand side of the screen, you can also see the bias distribution and factuality ratings for coverage of this story, with about 50% of outlets reporting on this story listed as right-leaning and 71% of them rated for high factuality. And Ground News also shows you important information about these outlets along with their headlines, like their political bias, their factuality rating, their corporate ownership, or their government affiliations. And I love the Ground News blind spot feature that shows me stories that are getting lots of attention in one political sphere but not in the other. It really helps me keep my media intake balanced. Ground News is a big part of my research and my day-to-day news consumption, and it could be for you too. All you have to do is go to ground.news/sandboxx with 2 X's, or follow that link in the description below to get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use every day. Again, that's ground.news/sandboxx to get 40% off their Vantage plan that'll help you stay on top of things. In 1998, Will Smith and Gene Hackman starred in a pretty entertaining action movie called Enemy of the State, in which Smith, playing a labor lawyer caught up in a high-level government conspiracy, is chased around the city by a team of NSA operatives with a satellite-based God's eye view of seemingly every move he makes. At the time, the systems employed by the movie's tech guys to guide their door-kicking colleagues were entirely science fiction. But today, nearly 3 decades later, Enemy of the State seems downright prescient in the way it depicted automated analysis and machine learning algorithms intertwined with a wide variety of surveillance systems, all working behind the scenes to guide and inform real-life operations. Of course, if you watched the movie back in the 90s, or even today, there's a good chance you don't see the fictional systems employed by the NSA as artificial intelligence based, because the movie never addresses exactly how these surveillance systems are able to track targets, identify patterns, or sift through the mountains of data pouring in from the combination of satellite-based sensors, networked security cameras, operatives on the ground, and more. The movie presents all of this labor-intensive analysis work as little more than a few keystrokes from tech nerds played by none other than Jack Black and Jamie Kennedy. But as unrealistic as that was at the time, it's actually pretty accurate to how the US military's AI-driven Maven Smart System is employed over the battlefield today. In fact, one could argue Maven is even more capable than the science fiction of the 90s was able to predict. The Maven Smart System, often referred to simply as Maven, is a Palantir-developed command and control AI platform that fuses data from upwards of 170 different kinds of sensors, ranging from space-based satellites to airborne ISR drones to ground-based radar arrays, signal intelligence, and even social media posts to create a single data-fused God's eye view of the battlefield that can not only be used for mission planning, but can even nominate targets for engagement, identify nearby weapon systems capable of completing the strike, relay combat taskers to conduct the strike, and then assess the impact of the munitions to ensure mission accomplishment. Project Maven was launched by the Pentagon in April of 2017 with the initial goal of harnessing computer vision, which is a field of AI meant to analyze, interpret, and understand digital images and video to help process the mountains of footage being created by American ISR aircraft and drones. A single ISR drone can reportedly produce terabytes of data that human analysts had to pore over manually in order to derive any intelligence value. It was a time-consuming and expensive process that was so labor-intensive, a great deal of footage reportedly went completely ignored due to manpower limitations alone. Before long, however, Maven began to grow in complexity and in capability, eventually coming to process and analyze data flowing into it from over 150 different kinds of sensors, again, ranging from satellites to radar arrays to sensors on the ground. In effect, Maven, as it exists today, could cut the 132-minute runtime of Enemy of the State down to, well, probably about 5 minutes, as it identified Smith's character and tracked him as he walked down the street, then identified the closest MQ-9 Reaper and, with just a few clicks of the mouse, tasked it with taking him out without any collateral damage by using an AGM-114 R9X Hellfire missile that packs deployable blades instead of an explosive warhead. I guess you could stretch the movie out just a little bit longer as the NSA's ground team cleaned up the debris and left people believing an odd meteor strike somehow took out a random labor lawyer as he was walking through the park. I mean, I am obviously joking here, but what's scary is that I'm not actually exaggerating all that much. The Maven Smart System that's already in service today is capable of ingesting real-time intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or ISR feeds, including video, imagery, radar, and radio signals, and then applying convolutional neural network-based computer vision to detect and classify people, vehicles, equipment, and a lot more. geotagging each as it differentiates between friendlies, enemies, and non-combatants. It can then use this data to nominate up to 1,000 targets for strikes per hour to users who can then turn to Maven's AI asset tasking recommender to identify the right weapon to engage each target based on a variety of factors, like the most suitable ordnance for the job, platform flying time, weapon loading details, and the whereabouts of friendly personnel and partner forces. Once a target has been identified and the appropriate weapon and platform have been determined, Maven can communicate directly with troops in the field, or even directly with platforms and weapon systems themselves. In 2020, Maven transmitted fire orders to a U.S. Army M142 HIMARS artillery system in testing at Fort Liberty for the first time. And by 2023, Maven demonstrated its ability to directly interface with Army mission command systems, like the Advanced Field Artillery Tactical Data System, to generate fire missions in Qatar in real combat operations, as a part of both Operations Spartan Shield and Inherent Resolve. In June of 2025, Maven gained the ability to interface directly with the U.S. Army's Aviation Mission Planning System, effectively automating the transition from conventional aviation mission planning systems into Maven's Common Operating Picture, or COP, and creating something of a one-stop shop for effective flight mission planning with the most up-to-date intelligence available. By January of 2026, Maven was already deployed across all major American combatant commands, as well as across NATO allied commands. Maven's chief architect, Palantir's Chad Walquist, characterized how this system has changed America's approach to warfare in pretty stark terms during a recent interview he did with the Register, when he said, and I quote, "I saw stats where normally we would have 2,000 intelligence officers actually trying to do targeting and look at stuff. Now that's 20, and they're doing it in rapid succession as well." When people talk about Maven's use in this context, you'll often hear them refer to opening and closing kill chains, which is a traditional way of executing strikes against battlefield targets. A kill chain in U.S. warfighting doctrine has 6 distinct steps from start to finish: find, fix, track, target, engage, and assess. Now, I'll run through what each of these steps mean very briefly, just for your situational awareness. Find means using available intelligence to identify your intended target. Fix means determining the specific coordinates of the target's location. Track means monitoring the target's movement to ensure you know precisely where they are. Target means selecting the appropriate weapon system, launch platform, and exact timeline for the strike. Engage means hitting the target with that munition. And assess means evaluating the effectiveness of the strike. Sometimes we call this doing a battle damage assessment. And while this process might sound simple, I promise it isn't. In real-world combat, there is a solid likelihood that many, if not all of these 6 steps will need to be completed by different assets, with potential delays between each based on asset availability and proximity. In movies, the United States military always has a stack of aircraft flying right overhead and available for any immediate tasking. But in real life, warfare tends to be pretty busy work, and you don't always have your pick of assets to pull from. But don't just take my word for it. I'm going to quote former U.S. Air Force F-16 pilot and senior fellow at the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies, Heather Penny, now. Quote, "Planners must think backwards from the target to optimize the kill chains used to attack it. Target characteristics dictate which platforms, sensors, and capabilities planners use. Nodes, meaning sensor platforms like drones, that perform similar functions but have different characteristics may not be interchangeable. The type and precision of the sensors used to locate and track a target, the type of weapon and effect, and even the bandwidth and latency of the kill chain's data links must be tailored to the target and mission." Now, as Penny points out in her analysis, it could sometimes take the American military hours to open and close a kill chain in past Middle East conflicts, with F-16s sometimes loitering for hours in what she calls the kill box, waiting for a weapons release order from the Joint Force Air Component Commander. And of course, That commander isn't dragging things out on purpose. They're waiting on analysts poring over drone feeds, satellite imagery, and maps of the battle space, while others were looking at the weapons they have available in theater and the aircraft that could potentially deliver them, and the refueling tankers that might need to be scrambled to support the striking aircraft, and much, much more. All told, this process involved 8 to 9 separate human-operated systems, often siloed or separated from one another as they worked. And as messy as all that sounds, it's important to know that America is probably the best in the world at rapidly opening and closing these kill chains. While Russian performance has improved in this context over the past 4 years of fighting in Ukraine, it often took them entire days for Russian forces to open and close a kill chain against Ukrainian targets just on the other side of their own border. Now, the time it takes to open and close kill chains is incredibly important, and not just because you want to take that target off the board. A really important element of all modern combat operations is, as you might imagine, working to disrupt your enemy's kill chains while you attempt to enact your own. And the longer it takes to open and then close a kill chain, the more vulnerable that kill chain is to disruption. A simple example of what a disruption might be could be shooting down the MQ-9 drone that was tracking a target. Once that target's lost, you got to start the whole process over again when you can find them. But Maven doesn't really employ this traditional kill chain model, and instead serves as something of a backbone for America's more modern approach that's been dubbed kill webs. Rather than executing a dozen separate kill chains, each using assets allocated specifically to that one job, a kill web distributes all of the steps for all of the kill chains across all of the battle space to all of the assets that are in that battle space. This creates sensor and maybe even strike redundancy, meaning if the drone you were using to track the target gets shot down, the job just seamlessly transitions to the next closest drone that's equipped to do the same job, interconnecting all of your kill chains until they form a spider's web of platforms and capabilities that is much more resilient than separate kill chains ever could be. But this isn't the only way Maven is employed on the battlefield. It's just the most direct. But for combat pilots, Maven's battle space management tools are arguably just as important. As Maven consumes real-time data feeds from sensors all over the battle space, it fuses it into a single overhead view that enables very effective mission planning with the most up-to-date information available. And that is vital for fighter and bomber pilots flying into contested airspace who need to know what types of air defense assets are deployed where, their maximum targeting envelopes, and a whole lot more in order to mitigate the risk and maximize their chances of mission accomplishment. Now, this requires extremely up-to-date intelligence that, until now, had to be processed by human analysts poring over images to try to determine what type of surface-to-air missile battery they were looking at and what its precise coordinates were in photos and video. And Maven isn't limited to just sifting through data to identify targets, friendlies, and non-combatants. It can also monitor vast expanses of the battle space in other ways, using those same object detection capabilities to notify its users when targets suddenly present themselves. It can even identify behavior patterns in individuals that might warrant further analysis, again, relaying an alert to users to determine if that nominated target warrants further investigation or not. Now, like the computers we see used in that movie Enemy of the State, the artificial intelligence that powers Maven isn't necessarily conspicuous or overt. It isn't talking like HAL 9000 or manifesting as a creepy hologram girl like in the Resident Evil movies. The advanced AI systems that make up the Maven enterprise are instead sort of invisible to the user, who, to some extent, is able to run the battle space like it's a real-time strategy game. But Maven's open system software architecture might ultimately prove to be its most valuable asset because it was purpose-built to work in concert with other third-party applications. And that means Maven can serve as the intelligence analyzing backbone of any number of new capabilities that have yet to manifest, or even some that already have. And a good example of that came in December of 2025, when the US Army's Southern European Command Task Force Africa Public Affairs Directorate integrated Maven with the data miner First Alert platform to feed real-time news alerts directly into Maven to support information operations within various command areas of responsibility, as well as common social media platforms to, quote, visualize social media sentiment and provide critical insights. And of course, it's also important to remember that Maven is far from the only artificial intelligence system or tool in active development or in use for the US military. Another high-profile effort that we've discussed several times on this channel before is the US Air Force's ongoing Skyborg program, which is training AI agents, as they're called, to pilot fighters in a wide variety of combat operations. Now, these AI agents are already racking up flight hours and victories in mock dogfights in very real aircraft, starting with a heavily modified F-16 called the X-62 Vista, and currently extending into a half-dozen combat-coded F-16s out of Florida for even more realistic training. Now, eventually, those AI agents will be tasked with flying new collaborative combat aircraft, or CCA drones, like Anduril's YFQ-44 Fury and General Atomics' YFQ-42 Dark Merlin, both of which are in active testing for the first increment of the CCA production contract. Now, those fighter drones will fly alongside advanced fighters like the F-22, F-35, and forthcoming F-47, taking their cues from the pilots on board. Now, I think we've all made jokes about the military's use of AI systems leading to a Skynet-like catastrophe. Heck, I made one on Twitter this morning. But joking aside, it really is important that we try to divorce our perceptions of AI from these pop culture depictions of the technology when we're participating in actual serious discourse. The artificial intelligence systems in military service today are not anywhere near complex enough to get struck by lightning and develop emotions like Johnny Five in Short Circuit. In fact, a lot of what we call AI today is little more than simple machine learning or automation that's already been around for a long time, but has since been rebranded as AI to take advantage of the hype train. And I'm sure someone will chime in down below to say that an AI-piloted drone went rogue in Air Force testing and tried to kill its handler to stop him from interfering with its mission. But that never happened. It was a hypothetical story that was presented poorly by an Air Force official and then jumped on by the world's media because, well, it made for a very exciting and sensational headline. And we actually have a video all about it if you want to learn more. But even if that story were true, it would not be a tale of an AI gone rogue. It would be a story about system engineers failing to establish the appropriate safeguards and a piece of software that, for some reason, was given autonomy over making kill decisions, which, importantly, would be a direct violation of DoD regulation, at least for now. And that points to one of the real dangers of AI. Not a sentient system that chooses to turn on its operator, but rather a complex piece of software that can be overwhelmed by variables until it reacts unpredictably. I can't emphasize this enough. When you build AI systems to take lives in combat, and then it takes lives when you didn't mean it to, that isn't sentience, it's bad quality control. If I built an AI robot to deliver coffee to me in my office, but instead it delivered it to the guest room next door, it didn't go rogue or choose to punish me by withholding caffeine. It's just a piece of software that didn't work the way it was supposed to, just like Premiere Pro, every time it crashes while I'm editing these videos. And that distinction really matters, because the assertion that all of these AI systems are just secretly maturing towards sentience and then rebellion comes with a sense of inevitability that frees us from having the hard conversations we really need to about how AI is best employed in warfare. It robs the topic of all the nuance, complexity, and attention it deserves and boils it down into a meme that you can either upvote or downvote. AI is good or it's bad. We should use it or we shouldn't. Here in the real world, The situation is a lot more complicated than that, and the real questions aren't about whether or not we should use AI. We already are. In fact, you use it all the time, whether you realize it or not, just in your common phone applications. The real questions are about how we should use AI safely and responsibly. By pretending all AI systems can be struck by lightning and come alive like Edie in the movie Stealth, we take a very complicated topic and make it simple enough for us to just dismiss as bad, freeing ourselves from the responsibility of actually engaging with it in a real and honest way. And ultimately, that only benefits the people who are fielding AI tools that people claim to fear, because sneeringly asking if anyone's seen the movie Terminator is not a real critique or criticism. It's a sarcastic remark everybody ignores, leaving the real topics that warrant being challenged on undiscussed. If we want safeguards on our AI systems, if we want to make sure they're being used in responsible ways, and if we want to ensure humans are always the ones making the final call when it comes to taking lives, we have to be willing to learn about and engage with what these systems actually are, rather than just attacking them based on nothing more than what we've seen in pop culture, even if sometimes what we see does look awfully similar. If you're a gun owner, you might be familiar with what I'm talking about. Every time there's a big push for new firearm legislation in America, we see a flood of lawmakers talking to the press about high-capacity clips that make AR-15s into automatic artillery cannons, and fear-stoking memes about how a black semi-automatic rifle with a pistol grip is a weapon of war, while nobody seems to have any concerns at all about a semi-automatic rifle with a wood-grain stock instead. To those who are familiar with firearms, these arguments don't just read as disingenuous, they are laughably out of touch with reality, and as a result, they're easy to dismiss, like someone who's never driven a car before telling you how to parallel park. Real discourse about firearms requires that both sides take the topic seriously enough to actually learn about firearms, how they function, how they're used, and how their prevalence impacts society. Without that, we aren't making progress, we're just sharing memes and hot takes to impress our friends who already agree with us. But as I've said before, in my opinion, the greatest threat that AI poses to those I love and hold dear is not a system that goes rogue or even a system that fails to function properly. It's a system like Maven, like Skyborg, and like many others in active development, working exactly as they're supposed to in the hands of those who mean us harm. Because AI is already changing the face of warfare, and it's going to continue to, whether we like it or not. And with that understanding in mind, developing AI warfighting capabilities is arguably the most important deterrent measure the United States military could focus on today. I might not like it, and I don't have to, because war is never a good thing. It's always a diplomatic failure of one kind or another, but a war won is always a better failure than a war lost. And with that ends yet another edition of Firepower from Sandboxx News. And one more time, I want to remind you guys that Sandboxx News now has its own app available on iOS and coming soon to Android devices. You can get all of our video content as well as all of our incredible written analysis penned by special operations and intelligence veterans alongside award-winning defense journalists. So download the app today and let me know what you think in the comments below. And with that ends yet another edition of Firepower from Sandboxx News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com or download the app for all the latest in news, entertainment, and merch from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe down below and leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next. And of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandboxx News.